This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, this is Dillon Hackworth.
This is Maureen Bogey.
And this is Creep Street.
Hello.
As always, follow us on Facebook, Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod. In our Facebook, there is another group, a little forum called Citizens of the Milky Way, a Creep Street fan page. That is something all are welcome to join. You just click that little let me in button and one of us will let you in. We just like to daily interact with our audience, share stories, let them know what the next episode's going to be, things like that.
Yeah, just little bonuses.
And of course, if once a week is not enough, and let's face it, it's not.
It ain't, and it never was, and it never will be. So don't even at me, bro.
You should head on over to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast for all sorts of goodies. We have a new subscriber, cannot wait to give her a shout out at the end of the show.
Yes, so excited. Thank you for joining us. But yes, on our Patreon, we have all sorts of great bonus content. We just released our definitive ranking of the best Paranormal Activity movies, or excuse me, the ranking of all of the Paranormal Activity movies. And that's just a little bit of a something that we put out for our Creep Street connoisseurs.
That was a lot of fun to do, I'll tell you that.
That's right.
Now, as we just now started recording, we looked out the window, and it is snowing here in Chicago, babe.
It is the first snow of the season here in Chicago. God damn, it really has nothing to do with our episode today, but gosh darn it. If it doesn't seem like something, maybe a sign of some crazy fun things in our future.
That's right. Well, you know what it does remind me? It reminds me that the holiday season is coming.
True, very true.
Hanukkah is about to start at the end of November. Of course, Christmas, Kwanzaa, everything in between. It's a wonderful time of year. Even if you don't celebrate any of it, it's still a charming time of year.
Right, and it's a couple days off work.
And absolutely. And you know what? If anything, what the holiday season means is another edition of our Listener Stories episode. We like to put it out right near the end of December, and already people have been giving us stuff, but we just wanted to make that announcement.
We want more.
Get those in. We can't wait. We cannot wait.
If you have a ghost experience, if there's an interesting true crime story in your hometown, if a friend of yours almost joined a cult, it
doesn't have to necessarily be a direct thing. Like, it can be a ghost experience you had, it could be a UFO experience you had, or it could just be a strange tale from your town that the world might not know about that we would love to share.
We want to know it.
Just share us your personal stories. We can't wait. And let me tell you something. Ooh, I got a cold chill running down my spine, and I don't think it's the weather outside.
Are you kidding me?
I think it's the subject of today's episode.
Okay, I think you're right, because today's episode has been highly requested, very much on people's minds all of these years later.
Yes.
It is a absolute iconic true crime case. Today we are talking about the Black Dahlia.
Ooh. And this was a listener suggestion.
Yes, that's right. This was suggested by the one, the only Daniel Westwood, aka @DangerBuzz1. And we thank you so much for recommending this episode. And I know you weren't the only one that has mentioned wanting to do this. We used to have this spreadsheet that I was really on top of listing off everyone who had requested certain episodes. I've fallen off of that, unfortunately. This is me right now stating in front of you all that I'm going to be better about it so that I can give the proper shout outs to these listener suggestions. So today's a big one.
Yeah.
This case is kind of one of those quintessential American true crime stories.
Oh, yeah.
I would think that people outside of the U.S. would hear of this as well by now, but if you haven't, this was a very bizarre unsolved murder from 1947 in Los Angeles, California. It's kind of known as this metaphor almost for the gritty underbelly of Hollywood and how it has this glitz and this glam, and it's so beautiful and seems all perfect, but underneath it there's real danger and grit and evil flowing underneath.
You know, there's obviously been big mainstream movies and books that were written that were actual retellings of the story, like nonfiction. And there's also a lot of fiction stuff that borrows from. It's a very popular case, and you've probably been exposed to elements of it, whether you even knew it or not.
Exactly, yes. So today's sources, we have some great ones. One is a YouTube video from the great true crime account, Stephanie Harlow.
St. Harlow.
St. Harlow. We love Stephanie Harlow. We used her for this episode, also our H.H. Holmes episode, and our Watcher House episode. Highly recommend you check out her channel. This video was titled, spoiler alert, The Black Dahlia.
Oh, yeah.
Also a video from the YouTube channel for Australia's Today Show, and that is on their YouTube channel, and the video is called Author Says His Own Father Murdered the Black Dahlia. Ooh. And then, of course, we have a fantastic book this week that I highly recommend. It is called Black Dahlia Red Rose by Pew Eatwell.
Yeah.
A fantastic book. It's a super popular book. You can buy it anywhere. If you're at all interested in this case, I recommend you check it out. It goes into one particular theory in depth, which I think is interesting, that we will talk about later in the episode.
Ooh, baby, baby, baby.
So the Black Dahlia herself, her actual name was Elizabeth Short. Elizabeth Short was born July 29th, 1924 in Hyde Park, Massachusetts. She was one of 5 daughters, and even though she was born in Hyde Park, Massachusetts, she mainly grew up in Medford, Massachusetts. Her dad's name was Cleo, and he made/designed mini golf courses for a living, which is like very weird. Not weird bad, but just interesting. I never really thought about who makes and designs them.
You're right, because it's like someone's got to do that.
I mean, it sounds like a great job, honestly.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this was mini golf courses
like putt-putt,
or if it was just more of like a different kind of miniature golf than we kind of know it right now, or if it was a kind of a little bit in between. No matter what it is, I think it sounds great. Unfortunately, as we know, during the Great Depression, the economy greatly impacted all of America. Not as many people mini golfing, as it were, and her dad, Cleo, really came on some hard times. But he killed himself when Elizabeth was about 5 or 6 years old. His car was found next to a bridge, and it was assumed that he jumped off of the bridge and plummeted to his own death. They never even searched for a body. This was so common at the time. They believed that is just what happened.
Wow, yeah, a lot of people, obviously, just out of desperation, didn't even look for him. But interestingly enough, Cleo didn't actually kill himself. He just staged it to look like he killed himself, and he ran away and abandoned his family. A few years after the fact, he came back and he said to Elizabeth's mom that he was sorry and he wanted to come back. And she was like, you know what? We've made it this far without you. Yeah.
We're going to keep making it without you.
Wow.
So good for Elizabeth's mom for being like, no.
Wow.
Get out of here. So then Cleo moved to California and was not a part of Elizabeth Short's life or childhood at all.
She got as far away pretty much as you can.
Exactly. Massachusetts to California. Pretty damn far. Now, Elizabeth, as she grew older, She had very thick, dark, beautiful hair, these gorgeous blue eyes, and she was just known as being an absolute knockout. Like, everyone would comment on how beautiful she was, and not only just her physical appearance, but just her kind of X factor, as it were. She walked very beautifully.
She had that charisma.
She had that charisma. She had that something. She was very confident. She was graceful. And apparently she was also very friendly and kind as well.
Right.
She really wanted to be a movie star, and she felt like she was meant for something more than just her life in Massachusetts. Now, all through growing up, Elizabeth had respiratory issues that would eventually turn into asthma and bronchitis. So living in Massachusetts was obviously hard. So starting at age 16, she would spend the winters in Miami, where she had family living there.
Okay. Where the cabal is?
Where the cabal is. Shout out to last week's episode.
Or the week before.
Or the week before that's episode. Hello, Love Has One Cult. But in this case, it wasn't just the cabal. It was also just Elizabeth's relatives lived there and, had a place for her to stay. Not as sexy as, the whole cabal story. But what can you do? But partially because of her respiratory issues, at the age of 19, Elizabeth moved to California. And this was kind of a young time for her to be moving, according to her family at least. However, to be going, all the way across the country by herself. However, because of these respiratory issues she had and really, struggling during the wintertime in Massachusetts, this was okay with the family. So she went for it. And she actually went and stayed with her father, Cleo. Cleo's back, baby.
Oh, so the dad that bailed.
The dad that bailed. She went Cleo was living in Viejo, and Elizabeth went there to be with him. She didn't go there to be with him, but she went there and she was staying with him.
I wonder how Mama Bear felt about that.
Exactly. I don't really know. That's a curious question that I would be interested to know about. Now, living together turned out to be kind of a rocky situation. Apparently, they had different expectations as to what their living situation would be like, as most conflicts are, just different expectations of what's going to happen. So she thought that she was going to be staying with her dad, having a place to stay as she, finds her footing and, starts a new life in California. And he thought that she was going to move in and kind of be a maid / kind of play housewife for him and clean and cook and all that stuff. And she didn't do that because that's not what she came to California to do. She didn't come to California to take care of her father, who was fine and didn't need taking care of.
Right, especially when he fucking bailed on the family.
Yeah, exactly. Apparently, he called her unseemly as well because she had lots of different dates and different men would be coming by to pick her up. So this man is weird.
Yeah, go fuck yourself, guy. Maybe you should have jumped off that fucking bridge.
Right. It's very bizarre. So they didn't really have a great living situation and it didn't really last very long. But Elizabeth did get a job, though. She worked at Camp Cook, which is a military base, and she was even voted Camp Cutie while she was working there.
Well,
everyone just thought she was so cute. A little inappropriate that was a thing that they were voting on, but a different time, God bless, good for you. But like I said, her dad did kick her out of the house. He gave her $100 and said, go back to Medford, Massachusetts. And just like any 19-year-old, she took the money and ran, baby. She was like, I'm not going back to Medford. I'm actually going to go live with a friend in Santa Barbara. And it was there that she was arrested for underage drinking. This is not really that big of a deal. It's not like she's some deviant.
You're right.
You know what I mean? It's not like a lot of times people are like, oh, she had a criminal record. It's like she was getting a little rowdy at a restaurant with friends and was drinking when she was, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, who fucking cares?
You and every other fucking high school kid.
Yeah. One time I got drunk at my friend Hannah's house in high school and just walked up and down a flight of stairs for about an hour and a half. And I didn't get arrested, but unfortunately, Elizabeth Short did get arrested for it, but she was able to work her wily wares, and she was not actually booked, but the cops put her on a bus back to Medford, Massachusetts. She traveled all over the United States working as a waitress. She lived really all over the place, but what she really loved was jazz clubs and boys. Now, I want to be upfront. I don't think it doesn't, first of all, it doesn't matter. But I think people bring it up a lot, so let's just talk about it. I don't think she was, quote unquote, sleeping around. Right. I don't think she was having sex with all of these men she was going on dates with. Some of them I'm sure she was, but not all of them. She just loved the male attention. She
Absolutely.
loved boys. She loved the chase. And also, money was tight. How could you get your meals paid for? By going on a date with someone.
Hey.
She wasn't the first person to do this, and she certainly won't be the last person to do this. And apparently, she actually was seen with so many different men because it was said she wouldn't put out, and that's why she had to move to a different man all the time.
Oh, that's a good point too, yeah.
It really doesn't matter whether or not, but people bring it up a lot, so I think it's worth just like mentioning and blah, blah, blah. Then one day, she met Lieutenant Gordon Fickling. He was a dashing, lovely, beautiful pilot.
Ooh.
And they were going to get married. However, World War II was popping off and Gordon Fickling was sent off. And so they decided not to get married.
Okay.
By New Year's Eve, 1944, Elizabeth finds herself in Miami once again, Will Smith style, Big Willie style. And it was there that night, New Year's Eve, 1944, so just a smooch away from 45. She met a major with the Flying Tigers, Matt Gordon. She straight up loved Matt, and they were going to get married, and they were very happy about getting married. However, Matt Gordon was in the service, so he was shipped out. So she was engaged to Major Matt Gordon, confusing that the other guy's first name was Gordon and this guy's last name is Gordon. But
that is funny.
yes, they were going to get married, and this time they actually stayed engaged during their time apart. Unfortunately, though, he was killed in a plane crash like right before he was supposed to come home.
No.
Yes, like I think it might have even been the day before he was supposed to come home, possibly.
Was it in battle or was it like an accident? Like
I am not totally sure. I want to say an accident, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Wow.
Yes, just like so tragic, so sad. At this point, she was completely heartbroken, but she just kept hanging around in Miami, and she still would go around doing her usual things, you know, loving a man in uniform and going out with them and whatnot, even though she was completely heartbroken. She really cared about her appearances. You know, she would go without food so that she would be able to buy like nice clothes. She hennaed her hair to make it like almost completely black, and she wore red lipstick, and people thought she was just like so absolutely stunning.
Wow.
In July of 1946, Elizabeth returns to California and gets back together with Gordon Fickling. Now, he didn't like, though, that he wasn't her number one man, that she also had kind of other guys in her rotation, if you will, to take a word from Insecure on HBO.
I need to watch that. I haven't seen it.
It's a good show. So they would eventually break up, and then Gordon Fickling would move to, I believe, North Carolina, and Elizabeth would move to LA to try to be a model. Now, even though she was, of course, so beautiful, this was and is a very competitive field.
Yeah.
And she really wasn't working as a model. It was during this time that she would start to stay with a man named Mark Hanson. Ooh. Mark Hansen was a businessman and part owner of a nightclub called the Florentine Gardens. Now, Mark Hansen was known to be a predator. He would let his, quote-unquote, his employees, his female employees, stay with him in his big house if they didn't have anywhere else to stay, but often they would have to sleep with him or things like that in order to be able to stay.
Oh, boy.
Now, you could pay money, but if you were short money or things like that, he would be like, try to pull that absolute bullshit. So this guy sucks as well. But unfortunately, Elizabeth worked there, and she did stay at Mark Hansen's house off and on. However, it is said, though, that people say different things, but it is one opinion that she never even slept with him, and that she always shooed away his advances. He was an older guy, and she was, not interested in him.
The point is, she's not the villain in that situation.
Yeah, no. If she did sleep with him, it's not her fault, and it's okay. And it is very possible that she never did, and she actually always rejected him over and over again.
Right.
So just an interesting little side note here, it was at the Florentine Gardens in 1946 that Elizabeth met a woman who was having her wedding reception there. Her name was Norma Jean Baker, a.k.a. Marilyn Monroe.
Wow.
Yes. So that's just a funny little thing. She wasn't Marilyn Monroe at the time. She was just Norma Jean. Also, keep in mind, Marilyn Monroe is Amy Carlson, if we remember that from, once again, our Love is One episode.
That's right. So she met Amy Carlson.
She met Amy Carlson.
Tied into the Miami thing, the cabal. Oh, my God.
I mean, it's all over the place. I mean, this is the real conspiracy.
Hey there.
It's not. Don't worry, you guys.
We're kidding.
Now, on December 8th, 1946, Elizabeth heads to San Diego, back down to San Diego. And she was found in a movie theater by the movie theater employee, Dorothy French. Now, Dorothy French saw that Elizabeth was sleeping or was trying to sleep in the movie theater, and Dorothy French felt bad for her. She, had seen this kind of thing before and knew that Elizabeth must really be on hard times. She invited Elizabeth to stay with Dorothy and her mother at Dorothy's home. Now, this stay with the Frenches was interesting for a couple reasons. Here is a quote from our book, Black Dahlia, Red Rose. The Frenches recalled, for example, a strange incident when two men and a woman came knocking on the door. Beth wouldn't answer, but peeked through the curtain. She seemed relieved when the trio finally left. She was terribly frightened and refused to talk about them, said Dorothy French. She was evasive when I asked other questions, so I gave up. Beth told the Frenches that a woman had chased her and her friend up Hollywood Boulevard in December. She seemed constantly in fear of something, said Elvira. Whenever anybody came to the door, she would act frightened. By the way, when Beth, that is Elizabeth. That's just a nickname.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But yes, so very interesting that something was going on that was really scaring her.
Yeah.
Don't know what that could have been. Was it specifically those three people? Or is it just she knew someone was after her?
Exactly.
I mean, why did she move to San Diego in the first place from LA?
Right.
I don't know. Now, Elizabeth just kind of laid around the house all day, very kind of depressed and languished, and then at night she would stay out all night partying.
Right.
She wouldn't contribute to the household at all, and she actually stayed there at the French's house for about a month before they finally had to say, we really can't do this anymore, you gotta go, unfortunately. But I understand where they're coming from.
Right.
So it was during this time that Elizabeth met a man named Red Manley.
Red Manley?
Red Manley, baby.
Woo,
Yes.
Damn. Was he a stud?
I think he was a stud. I mean, she liked him. They dated, apparently, and slept, quote, with their clothes on in a motel on January 8th. It's implied that they slept in separate beds and didn't touch each other at all. However, I don't believe that, and I believe that they were having sex. But Red Manley was married.
Manley?
Red Manley acting like a little bit of a little freak star. Yeah. A little bit of a freak show. A little freaky. And then on January 9th, Red Manley drove Elizabeth to the Biltmore Hotel in Los Angeles and dropped her off at about 6:30 p.m. And this was the last place that Elizabeth Short was seen alive.
Oh, boy.
Yes.
Manly.
The Biltmore Hotel was a very glamorous hotel stayed in by the best and the brightest and the celebritiest celebrities.
Of course.
And it is said that Elizabeth Ghosts haunts the 10th and 11th floor of this hotel.
I was going to say the Biltmore Hotel is today famous for just being one, I think it's still like a very luxurious, like a nice hotel, but it's also known for being haunted.
Oh, spooky. We should stay there someday if we can.
Absolutely.
Now, the doorman of the hotel said that he saw a dark figure outside wave and beckon to Elizabeth from outside at about 10 p.m. that night.
Okay.
And a dark figure, not in like a ominous, like shadow person, like it just was through the window and he couldn't really see, and it just was, he could see that it was a person waving to her, but could not tell who it was.
Right.
Now, at this point, it's interesting. I don't know, did Elizabeth go to the Biltmore Hotel because she didn't have anywhere else to go and she wanted to go to a place where there would be lots of rich men around, where she could sit in the lobby and wait for someone to pick her up, and take her out to dinner and, whatever? Or was she there waiting for someone specifically? We don't know. I wish we did know, because I think that would probably offer up a lot of answers for us.
Absolutely.
But once Elizabeth leaves the hotel at about 10 p.m., she goes missing. And she is missing for about 1 week. This is called the missing week. It was on January 15th, 1947, that Elizabeth was finally found. However, keep in mind, no one was really searching for her at this time. It wasn't until later that week would be referred to as the missing week.
Oh, so they no one really knew she was...
No one knew she was missing.
You're right, because she had just left. She was on her own at this time.
She was on her own, so it wasn't like the police had been searching for her.
Ah.
She was just gone. Betty Bersinger and her 3-year-old daughter were out walking at about 10 a.m. They were walking to their local cobbler to pick up a pair of shoes that had been repaired. They were walking on South Norton Avenue when they were passing a vacant lot, and Betty Bersinger saw something very strange in the vacant lot. She saw a cloud of flies low to the ground.
Oh boy.
And then a discarded store mannequin. And here's a quote from our source. Squinting, the young mother could just about make out what appeared to be a white shop mannequin sprawled on the rough grass by the sidewalk. Bizarrely, it appeared to have been cut in half. My goodness, it was so white, said Betty many years later. It didn't look like anything more than perhaps an artificial model. It was so white and separated in the middle. I noticed the dark hair and this white form. The presence of this palely glinting object in a place where children played was troubling. It just didn't seem right to me, said Betty. I could see these kids on their bicycles, and I thought, maybe it'll scare those kids if they ride to school and see this. So I'd better call somebody to come along and at least have a look and see what it is.
So she didn't want to go up and look for herself.
So she didn't want to even go up and look for herself.
And at this time, she's thinking it's a mannequin.
At this point, she's thinking it's a mannequin. That is how white this thing is.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably just so far from her mind.
Yeah.
That it didn't even cross her mind that could be a body.
Right.
So she went to the nearest house that she could, rang the doorbell, and used their phone to call the police. And what the police found was truly horrifying. They found the body of a woman, totally naked, on her back, her arms bent above her head and legs spread. She was covered in cuts and cigarette burns, rope marks around her wrists, ankles, and neck. Her face was cut into a, quote, Glasgow smile or Chelsea grin. Every source I read or watched or whatever referred to it as a Glasgow smile or a Chelsea grin. Basically what it means is it's a kind of like the Joker. You take a knife and you like extend this person's smile up their cheeks. So
it was a way of sending a message.
Right.
To the other, I don't know, the other side, the other team,
the other gang
or whatever. It was, you let that person live, but they'll live with these hideous scars, and it's kind of like a warning.
A calling card, kind of, yes.
Yeah.
So she had this cut on her face, a permanent smile. However, she was deceased. She was freshly washed, and she was perfectly bisected at the waist. Her bottom half was about 1 foot away from her top half, and she was drained of all of her blood.
Wow. And I think we need to emphasize what they mean by cleanly cut in half. Like, it literally precision.
Yes.
Cut in half.
Like, they didn't just use a sharp knife. Or just
she was
something.
Right. This was like a clean, precise cut.
In fact, the famous LAPD detective Jigsaw John St. John would say that, quote, the perpetrator may have had some knowledge of anatomy. He wasn't necessarily in the medical profession. What this means is they believed that this person had some kind of familiarity and professional experience with something like this. Like, it didn't have to be a doctor, like a medical doctor, but maybe it was someone that worked in the medical field or something like that. Maybe it was a doctor or a nurse or a veterinarian or a mortician or something like that, where they would have some experience with something like this. So the LAPD started an investigation right away with the help of the press. The press and the police really worked together at this time, which is kind of weird to think about, but they did. Also, the FBI right away was helping with this case. It is worth mentioning that at this time, and all other times, but especially at this time, the LAPD was extremely corrupt.
Yeah.
It was really a time of corruption within the police department and the press and the politicians and everyone kind of coming together. And so investigations could get very muddied very, very easily. So just keep that in mind. Then that's also not just me saying that. That's not my opinion. That's a fact. So anyway, officers Frank Perkins and Will Fitzgerald were the first on the scene, and when they got there, the crime scene was absolutely swarmed with people and the press. Right away, what they really noticed was the lack of blood, how bizarre that was, and how that really confirmed to them that this body, this person, was killed elsewhere and then staged here at this vacant lot to send a message. Kind of frustratingly, they were we have two groups of people that could have done this. Either someone who knew her or someone who didn't know her. And it's okay, well, no shit. But their reasoning did make a little bit of sense. One, they were this was so violent and messed up. There had to have been so much emotion for someone to do something like this. So that must have meant that this person knew the victim.
Right, there was a passion to it.
Yes. Or this crime was so depraved and so bizarre that a stranger or a psychopath must have done this.
If anything, it lacks that it's more like someone's completing a task.
A task, right. Yes. So, and I mean, I think there's a world where it's both are right. It's the psychopath that knew her. That's what I think is what happened, personally.
Right.
There was dew on the body, so they knew that the body must have been placed there sometime after 2 a.m. because of the temperature and science reasons. And she was, like we said before, completely freshly washed. Detectives Harry Hansen, no relation to that guy Mark Hansen before, just a different Hansen, and Detective Finis Brown were assigned to the case. The first step that they had to figure out was who was this person. So they took fingerprints of the dead body. However, they needed to be sent to the FBI. And to be able to send the prints to the FBI and to, have that all work out would take a week. They felt that would take too long. So the LA Examiner, a newspaper, had a machine that was kind of like a precursor to the fax machine. And they came in and they said, you can use this machine to send in the prints to the FBI. And the prints arrived on the 16th. So the murder happened on the 15th, and the prints were already sent and good to go to the FBI on the 16th. So that was a huge deal. It was very exciting because Elizabeth Short had been arrested before because of the whole situation with the underage drinking. She had fingerprints on file, and they were able to determine that it was indeed Elizabeth Short. But this technology was such a big deal that FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover actually had something to say about this crime.
The action of the examiner in transmitting the fingerprints of an unidentified murder victim is an excellent illustration of the cooperation of the press with law enforcement, and in such cooperation that aids law enforcement in curbing the increase in crime.
How interesting that this is 1947.
Yeah.
J. Edgar Hoover gets mentioned. Roswell, 1947.
Yes.
J. Edgar Hoover gets mentioned. Just funny that was... What a busy year for Hoover, huh?
Yes, a big year for Hoover, the Hoover fella. It's so funny. A lot of our previous episodes and everything are kind of coming together in this episode
funny
in a way.
is that?
And I wasn't expecting that. It's very interesting. Dr. Frederick Newhart would then perform the autopsy and discovered that the cause of death was hemorrhage and shock from a concussion of the brain and laceration of the face. So the Glasgow smile or the Chelsea grin.
Is what killed her.
Yes, as well as a concussion.
Okay.
Killed her. So it was shock and a loss of blood from those attacks.
Ah.
Some of her injuries were incurred post-mortem, but unfortunately, most of the injuries she suffered happened while she was still alive. So it seems like for that week she was missing, she was kept alive and tortured for most of that time.
Holy shit.
Yeah, very, very sad. This is just so gross and disgusting. So the police quickly told Cleo, who is Elizabeth's father, because he was ironically only living like 3 miles away from the crime scene at that time. Cleo was in a drunken stupor when they arrived at the house, and it took like 10 minutes for them to even like get him to come to the door and answer the door. When they told him what happened, he said that he wanted nothing to do with this and her and did not care really at all that this had happened. He said that he hadn't seen her or spoken to her since 1943, and he even refused to go to the morgue to identify her body and didn't attend her funeral. That's how pissed off he was that she didn't, like cook and clean like a good little housewife for him.
What a piece of shit.
A true piece of shit.
True piece of shit.
A chode. This is a chode alert. They reached out to her ex-boyfriend, Gordon Fickling, who lived in North Carolina at the time, and he said that he had sent $100 to her in December of 1946. He would send her money occasionally. And the last letter that he received from her was on January 8th, 1947, and she said that she was going to Chicago to be a model. So apparently she was just about to head out to Chicago, or at least that's what she was saying she was going to do the day before she disappeared.
Right.
The police went to every single house within a 10-mile radius of the crime scene, but they found nothing. The FBI even searched every single medical student in the area because of the surgical nature of the crime, and they found nothing.
Wow.
Then they reached out to Red Manley, the guy who said they just slept in a motel together but didn't, have sex or whatever.
Right.
No, he was discharged from the military at one point for being, quote, mentally unfit, which was interesting to the detectives. However, he was questioned for hours and hours and hours. He was submitted to 2 polygraph tests, and he had a good alibi that was able to be cleared for him by his wife and another couple, saying that they were all playing cards, so that he was really in the clear, honestly. His polygraph tests came back inconclusive, but just the fact that he took the polygraph tests, and that in combination with the fact that he had the alibi and that he wasn't in the area at the time really kind of checked out.
I didn't realize polygraphs had been around that long.
I know, I didn't either until I was researching this. I was like, oh, I didn't know. So, as I'm sure we all out there can imagine, the newspapers and the press went absolutely fucking wild over this case.
Huge. This was huge.
This was huge, this was large, and it was also in charge, and it was kind of the number one case. And it was really also the fact that the newspapers were calling her the Black Dahlia, calling Elizabeth the Black Dahlia, that really also kind of amped up the case as well.
It was good marketing.
Great marketing. I mean, why they called her the Black Dahlia, it's not really totally clear. It could be kind of for her dark hair. She apparently wore a flower in her hair. She was very beautiful like a flower. There's lots of different reasons. Now, in the press, they were calling her a man-eater, even a prostitute, saying that she would bleed men dry. It was very, editorialized and very, very sensationalized. However, we know that that is really not the case, but that's what sells newspapers, baby. And one example of how truly insane the situation with the press is as follows. Right when Elizabeth Short's body was found and she was identified, a reporter wanted some information from Elizabeth's mother, Phoebe Short. Phoebe Short did not know that her daughter was dead yet.
Oh, no.
So the reporter calls Phoebe Short and says, "Hey, your daughter Elizabeth has won a beauty contest. We would love to get some answers to some questions we have for you about her." Phoebe was so proud of her daughter for winning this beauty contest and went on and chatted away and answered all of this reporter's questions. And it wasn't until the end of the interview that the reporter said, "Hey, your daughter actually was murdered. And that's why I asked all those questions."
No.
Isn't that insane?
That is one of the most evil,
the most depraved.
that is
some vile shit.
That is awful.
Then on January 23rd, 1947, the editor of the LA Examiner gets a call from the murderer. He called himself the Black Dahlia Avenger and said that he didn't like the way that the papers were covering the story and would soon send a package. The next day, a package arrived of Elizabeth's birth certificate, social security card, personal photos, Matt Gordon's obituary, her fiancé, Mark Hansen's address book, her former boss, and with a ransom note style note saying, "Here is the Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow."
What? Wow.
And all of these items were wiped down with gasoline so that no fingerprints could be found on any of this.
God. Oh my God. I didn't realize all this.
I know. So whoever sent that in actually must have been the killer to have all of this information and to have all of these items of hers.
Right. And you got to consider she didn't have anywhere to stay, so she probably had all this stuff on her.
Right. So 33 people confessed to the case, and hundreds of more people claimed to know her and said to have had info about her. And this only kind of slowed down the case, of course, but some of those people that came forward and said they knew her actually did know her and did have some information that did help the investigation.
Which you find in a lot of these high-profile cases, like when there's not, someone hasn't been around, when they don't know who's done it, you'll hear about this a lot. Like, dickheads will call in and be like, you know. And some of them truly believe it because they're fucking insane, or they're just soulless fuckers, but...
Yeah, and they, you gotta look into every lead, so
Exactly.
it really just delays and delays and delays the investigation.
Exactly.
Now that we have all of this information, let's talk suspects.
Oh, please.
The first one we should talk about is Red Manley. I also want to point out that it's been hard for me this whole episode to not say Rex Manning.
Oh,
like
yeah,
the movie
you're right.
Empire Records, like Rex Manning Day. That's not his name. It's Red Manley. He's the one that dropped her off at the Biltmore Hotel. So he was the last person to really spend time with her, and that is why he is on this list. However, he was very cooperative with police. He had a pretty firm alibi and all those things, so I personally don't really find him to be a realistic suspect for me. So let's move on to the next suspect, a very interesting one, and this is the suspect that the author of our book source this week, Black Dahlia Red Rose, she believes that this is the culprit.
Okay.
That is Mark Hansen. He was that man who owned the Florentine Gardens where she worked in LA for a little bit, and where he had let people come and stay at the place if they would sleep with him, kind of thing.
Ah, yes.
So on January 8th, that's the day before she went missing, Elizabeth called him while she was still in San Diego. No one knows exactly what they talked about, but all we know is that a phone call was made. Maybe she was letting him know that she was going to LA, and he said, "Hey, meet me at the Biltmore Hotel." Or maybe it was something completely different. I don't know. But we do know that he was incredibly jealous of other men, and that she had declined his offers and his advances so many times that maybe he finally snapped.
Wow.
There was also a man named Leslie Dillon. He was a former mortician's assistant and a current lackey to the mob and Mark Hansen himself.
Interesting. Okay.
And it's thought that maybe Mark Hansen had Leslie Dillon do the murder on his behalf.
Interesting. Okay.
Leslie Dillon actually was a prime suspect at first, and in 1949, so a couple years after the murder, Leslie Dillon sent a letter to a LAPD psychiatrist under the pseudonym Jack Sand. He said that he was writing the doctor because he saw him in a magazine article about the Black Dahlia case and wanted to know more about it, and said that he was interested in sadism and sexual psychopaths and wanted to write a book about it. The doctor, whose name was Dr. River and Leslie Dillon, aka at this point he thinks he's fooling people going by Jack Sand, but they know that who it is. They exchange a few more letters, and at this point Dr. Rivers believes that Leslie Dillon did do it.
Okay.
He knew more than he should, but Leslie Dillon said that an associate of his named Jeff Connors did it. and did it in a hotel room. Dr. Rivers thought that this Jeff Connors fellow was just a figment of Leslie Dillon's imagination. They met in Las Vegas because it was neutral territory for the both of them. And Leslie Dillon was like, no, really, there is a Jeff Connors, and really, he did it. And they were like, okay, fine, then show us who Jeff, take us to Jeff. So they go all around San Francisco where they said this Jeff character was, and they couldn't find him anywhere. So they detained Leslie Dillon and questioned him for 2 days, took him into custody on January 9th, 1949, and on the 11th, this Jeff Connors fellow was actually found. His actual name was Artie Lang.
The comedian?
I know. This is funny.
That is fun.
I know. So this is a different guy. And Artie Lang was a janitor at Columbia Studios, where Elizabeth would often hang out, hoping to be discovered. They could not confirm the whereabouts for Leslie Dillon between January 9th and January 15th. That was the missing week. But they still released him because they were so focused on this Artie character. Mark Hansen was shown a photo of Leslie Dillon, and all Mark said was that he knew that Elizabeth had brought him around sometime.
Okay.
Let's think about that. Did that actually happen? And was Mark Hansen jealous that Leslie Dillon was able to sleep with Elizabeth? Was that a lie just so that he could try to implicate Leslie Dillon being more guilty than Mark Hansen was?
Right.
I don't know.
Wow, okay.
So it's thought that, by Pew Eatwell at least, the author of our book today, that maybe Mark Hansen told Leslie Dillon to get rid of Elizabeth Short, but did not know that Leslie Dillon was a psycho and do what he did.
Okay.
It is theorized that Mark Hansen and Leslie Dillon took Elizabeth Short to the New Astor Motel where Leslie had lived previously. It seems like a neighbor saw Elizabeth Short there, or at least someone that matched Elizabeth Short's description.
Okay.
The owners of the motel said that they saw Mark Hansen at the hotel, and the owner said, quote, "I hope the mob doesn't kill me for this," because of the involvement with Mark Hansen. On January 15th, the day that Elizabeth Short's body was found, cabin number 3 of this motel was filled with blood and feces. And others had said that a woman matching Elizabeth's description was staying there that week, that missing week, and so was Mark Hansen. Apparently she looked scared, was always crying, and maybe drugged or trapped. Now, this makes you wonder, why didn't anyone do a fucking thing about it? And the answer is because people are chodes.
Wow.
And if you do see someone looking like this, then you need to call someone and you need to do something about it. I understand that the LAPD was trash, but, still,
Right.
You gotta do something. Apparently, this woman who matched the description of Elizabeth Short was staying in cabin number 9. And the morning her body was discovered, a packet of bloody clothes fitting her style were found in the room. So the police re-interview the owners of the motel as well as some other guests there. But for some reason, they re-interview these people in Mark Hansen's office with Mark Hansen.
That is that's so fucking weird.
Like, they're clearly trying to intimidate people into not saying what they're saying.
This is so fucking weird.
2 of the witnesses back off and said that they were mistaken and that they hadn't seen Mark Hansen and that none of this had happened. Where 2 of them actually stood strong, even after the police threatened them about them committing perjury.
Holy shit.
Now, in early 1949, an investigation was done into the LAPD and to a few different cases, including the Elizabeth Short case. And the investigation came back saying that there was a ton of corruption involved in the case. And I'm sure this was part of it.
Wow.
So we said before that there was a lot of corruption going on with the LAPD and the higher-ups and the rich and powerful people in LA.
Right.
Is it possible that Mark Hansen's involvement was covered up by the police because Mark Hansen was involved with the mob and the police were very intermingled at the time? I don't know. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense that Mark Hansen was never really the fact that these people were questioned in front of Mark Hansen is insane.
That's insanity.
What other reason could there be for that happening?
Yeah, that's absolute insanity.
And not just in front of Mark Hansen, but like in Mark Hansen's office.
Yeah.
Like on his turf too. It's like that. It's just insane.
No way.
So that is a very compelling case right there against Mark Hansen. But another very compelling suspect is Dr. George Hodel.
Oh boy.
Now, Dr. George Hodel lived a very bizarre, interesting life. He was an absolute grade A piece of shit, but he did live an interesting life.
Okay.
There are a few different books written about him, especially by his son, Steve Hodel. I haven't read them myself, but I've heard nothing but good things about them. The subject matter of those books will become clear in just a moment here.
Oh, yes.
So Dr. George Hodel was born in 1907. He was an only child living in LA, and at about 6 or 7, he was deemed a musical prodigy and apparently studied with Madame Montessori herself in Rome. So a very gifted child, which doesn't mean shit.
Doesn't mean shit.
Everyone always makes a big deal out of it, but you know who else was a gifted child? Keith Raniere.
Yeah, Keith Raniere was a gifted child.
You know who wasn't a gifted child? Me, and I'm fucking smart as shit.
That's right.
But apparently he was playing to huge auditoriums at the age of 9. He had an IQ of 186, which is 1 point higher than Einstein. He went to Caltech at age 14, but he had a quote-unquote affair with one of his professor's wives and got her pregnant and was asked to leave because of the scandal. I think it's weird that they call it an affair when really if he was an underage kid, but
Yeah.
Once again, a different time. I don't really understand the entire situation. After that, he became a reporter and would go to crime scenes with cops. This is where that connection between the press and the police kind of comes again. So he was spending a lot of time at grisly crime scenes, murder scenes, things that other people couldn't even imagine he was seeing.
Right.
Then he gets his girlfriend Emilia pregnant. He goes to Berkeley for pre-med, then UC San Francisco to finish up med school. He has a son with his wife and a daughter with another person he's having an affair with at the same time. Then he becomes a venereal disease control officer for the LA Health Department. Then he gets a new wife and has 3 more kids. And it's then that he would move into the Sodden house, which is a house that was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright's son. And it looks like a Mayan temple. I recommend you Google it. It's very interesting.
Very interesting.
Yes, it's a very beautiful, cool house. But
Yeah.
he would throw a lot of A-list parties there. And he had a secret room in the house where no children were allowed.
Uh-oh. Sounds like some Eyes Wide Shut shit.
Yikes! Now, when one of his children, Tamar, was 14 years old, Dr. George Hodel was arrested for incest because he sexually assaulted his own daughter, Tamar, and passed her around to his friends at these parties when she was only 14 years old. She ran away and told the police about this, and even though there were 3 adult witnesses to confirm these crimes, he hired the top defense attorney in the country and said that Tamar made everything up and George was acquitted.
Wow.
Now, during the questioning for the incest trial, they were able to gain access to his home without George Hodel's knowing, and they planted lots of different microphones in the house and were able to listen in for the next 40 days. Some Sopranos shit.
Yeah.
Now, on February 18th, 1947, they got very interesting information from these tapes. They got a kind of confession of him killing his secretary, possibly the Black Dahlia, and heard him possibly kill another woman in the home.
Whoa, okay.
Now, these tapes were being listened to from a police car in real time, and they didn't do anything.
Wow.
The transcripts of these tapes didn't come out until many, many years later. Now, Dr. Hodel wasn't just the venereal disease officer for LA County. He also was involved in some other nefarious activities. Like he treated a lot of the people in LA, anyone from prostitutes all the way up to the highest classes of people, the rich and the famous in LA.
Right.
And he was known for performing abortions for people in and connected to the police department, as well as high-ranking government officials, celebrities, things like that. So he had a lot of information on people.
Wow.
And according to Steve Hodel, who is George Hodell's son and a former LAPD detective, he said that Elizabeth Short and Dr. George Hodel knew each other and even dated. But because of his position, he was untouchable.
So this sounds like some Epstein shit.
It does sound like some Epstein shit, exactly. So after he gets acquitted of the incest trial, George Hodel quickly gets his affairs in order and moves to Asia. And when he's living in the Philippines in Manila, shout out to our listeners in Manila.
Wow, he went far.
He went very far.
He went running.
He went running, honey. There was a very similar murder called the Jigsaw Murder, where a body was bisected in half in 1967.
In the Philippines?
In Manila, while he was living in Manila.
In Manila. Oh, wow.
Yes. So, why was George Hodel never really, with all of this information backing it up, what happened? Why did nothing really come of this?
Right.
Well, it makes the LAPD look really, really bad that they let this sexual predator do all of the terrible things he was doing to his family and listening to all of these things that he said that he did.
Right.
And then them not do anything about it.
Wow.
It makes the LAPD look terrible. Now, since then, a lot of the evidence has gone missing, quote unquote.
Okay.
And there is a filing cabinet which remains with the information and the evidence of this case, but it's really under lock and key, and only one person known as the gatekeeper has access
Interesting.
to all of the information in here. And a lot of the information wasn't really brought out into light until somewhat recently, like these records and things like that. It's just an incredibly fascinating case. I personally think, I do think it's either Mark Hansen / Leslie Dillon or George Hodel. I can't decide who I think did it. I don't know.
It sounds like it's that's
either of them.
Fascinating.
There's just so much evidence for both people. That's what really makes me think, how could it only be one of them, you know? And then maybe it is just a really weird coincidence that there's so many things that line up, and that's why George Hodel ran away, because he knew that things looked bad for him even though he didn't actually do it.
Right.
I don't know. Or maybe he did do it and that's why he ran away. I mean, I don't know. But either way, I don't know who did this. You guys, please let us know your theories and who you think committed this murder. Was it Mark Hansen / Leslie Dillon? Was it Dr. George Hodel? Was it someone else we didn't even mention in this episode? I mean, you let us know who you think and what you think is going on, because this is a fascinating case.
All right. That wraps it up for the Black Dahlia Murder. Maureen, thank you so much for all of that research.
It was a blast to do. Thank you so much to everyone who requested it. And please let us know your theories.
Absolutely. And right now, let me cleanse that palate with the names of our top tier Patreon subscribers, including a newbie.
Woohoo!
Of course, the Dream, James Watkins. The Finnish Face, Via Lundqvist. The Madman, Marcus Hall. The Vivacious Vicky McHugh. The Tenacious Teresa Hackworth. The Heartbreak Kid, Chris Hackworth. The Oh-So-Suave, Sean Richardson. The British Bonebreaker, Bex Martin. The Notorious Nicholas Barker. The Terrifying Taylor Lashmet. The Count of Cool, Cameron Corliss. The Archduke of Attitude, Adam Archer. The Sinister Sam Kiker. The Nightmare of New Zealand, Noeline Vivilli. The Loathsome Johnny Love. The Carnivorous Kevin Bogey. The Killer Stud, Carl Staub. And the newcomer, the Firestarter, Hannah Carter.
Yes, Hannah, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Creep Street Homeowners Association. Gosh darn it if we're not happy to have you joining us.
So happy to have you join. If you'd like to be just like Hannah and all the others, go to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast for all sorts of goodies. Of course, we will be at Days of the Dead here in Rosemont, Illinois, November 19th through the 21st. And then, of course, C2E2 in December, the 10th through the 12th at the McCormick Center here in Chicago, Illinois, with our panel being December December 10th, that Friday night at 7 p.m. All right.
Wow.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dillon Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
Good night and goodbye.
Bye.